Hello and welcome. You're watching Arts TV weekly news review programme with me, Peter Nash. Each week we bring you the major news items from across Ethiopia and the region. On Thursday the 9th of June, a forum was held at the University of Gondar which called against foreign interference into the internal affairs of Ethiopia and the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. The president of the university, Dr. Asrat, said the purpose of the forum was to inform the international community that their proposed interventions were unnecessary, and he asked them to cease any actions with this intention. Foreign meddling of this kind, he went on to say, was against international law, principles and norms. He also stated that the forum was intended to create a national movement which would strengthen support from all Ethiopians for the second filling of the GERD. 7 papers were presented which focused on international water law and water crisis management. The esteemed panel, including academics, politicians and technical experts from across the region, were present to objectively discuss the issues put forth. The GERD is due to start its second filling in early July to coincide with Ethiopia's rainy season. This week, the Federal Police Criminal Investigations Bureau gave a briefing outlining the reforms underway which will affect the rights of detained criminal suspects in Ethiopia. During the briefing, the Deputy Commissioner General, Zelalem Mengiste, said that since the institutional reforms began, suspects are treated better and the numbers of reported human rights abuses has declined. Using technology-based investigations, the Bureau has managed to root out the abuses which happened regularly in the past. These investigations came at the behest of political officials after human rights abuses of suspects being held in custody came to their attention. In particular, the treatment of suspects at Ma Ekelewe detention centre had tarnished the image of the federal police institution. As a result of the reforms, new directives are in place which strictly prohibit the use of force, unfair incarceration and other inhumane acts against suspects. Federal Police Commissioner General Demelash Gabri Michael, for his part, said that the Bureau has dramatically improved the rights of suspects by reforming technology, manpower, attitudes and institutional processes. And now for some news from across the region. A recent report from WHO's Africa headquarters in Brazzaville warned that African countries must urgently boost critical care capacity to prevent health facilities being overwhelmed by COVID-19 patients. This comes as vaccine shipments to the continent grind to a near halt. Weak observance of preventative measures, increased population movement and a change of weather have all heightened the risk of COVID-19 resurgence in many countries. A regional WHO director for Africa said, "The threat of a severe third wave in Africa is real and rising. Our priority is clear. It's crucial that we swiftly vaccinate high-risk groups." While many countries outside of Africa have now vaccinated their high-priority groups and are now even considering vaccinating children, African countries are unable to adequately protect their most vulnerable populations. In the last 2 weeks, Africa recorded a 20% average increase in cases compared with the previous fortnight, with many countries seeing a 40% increase or more. This is a worrying trend in Africa, as it has 2.9% of cases globally, but accounts for 3.7% of deaths. The increase in cases comes as COVID-19 vaccine shipments to the continent begins to slow down. Many countries, including Burkina Faso, Rwanda and Togo, are all receiving far fewer doses than expected through the COVAX program. COVAX administrators are in talks with several manufacturers, as well as with countries which have vaccinated their high-risk groups, to share their doses. In a recent statement from the French president, Mr. Macron said France must look history in the face and recognise the share of suffering that it inflicted on the Rwandan people. The speech was delivered at a genocide memorial in Kigali, Rwanda's capital, last week. In ignoring the warnings of the most clear-sighted observers, he said, France bore damning responsibility in a chain of events that led to the worst. He hoped survivors of the genocide might perhaps forgive France. Mr. Macron is the first French president to recognise his country's responsibility in the slaughter of hundreds of thousands of Rwandans, mostly Tutsis, in 1994. French leaders long claimed their country had misunderstood what was going on. Rwanda, under Tutsi leadership, cut diplomatic ties with France in 2006. These recent talks, however, represent a new development in re-evaluating their bilateral ties. In Paris, Mr. Macron's acknowledgement is considered part of an effort to reset policy in Africa, using history to reshape current ties. Last year, France returned 27 works of art to Benin and Senegal, after the president promised to start handing back artifacts taken under colonial rule. Mr. Macron's Africa reset is based on a fresh geostrategic calculation. Keen to promote broader French economic interests and wary of competition from China and Turkey, he has begun courting other African leaders too. After Rwanda, he headed to South Africa to discuss getting COVID-19 vaccines to the continent, as well as more French business. At least 55 people were killed overnight in 2 attacks on villages in eastern Congo on Monday. The United Nations said it was potentially the worst night of violence the area has seen in the last 4 years. The army and local civil rights groups blamed the Islamist armed group Allied Democratic Forces for the attacks, which took place at the villages of Chabi, Boga and a camp for displaced people, all situated close to the Ugandan border. Albert Basagu, the head of a civil rights group in Boga, said that on arrival at the scene he found that the attackers had already killed an Anglican pastor and seriously wounded his daughter. Many others lay dead, including the wife of a local chief. In March, the United States labelled the ADF a foreign terrorist organisation. The group has in the past proclaimed allegiance to Islamic State, although the UN says evidence linking it to other Islamist militant networks is scant. Uganda announced earlier this month that it had agreed to share intelligence and coordinate operations against the rebels, but that it would not deploy troops in the Congo. On the 4th of June, the Nigerian government enacted a nationwide suspension of Twitter in an effort, they said, to curb threats to Nigeria's corporate existence. While only a minority of Nigerians use Twitter, they form part of the most vocal and politically active segments of the population. Many young people have recently used Twitter and other social media platforms to organise anti-government protests. The government's decision to ban Twitter came days after the social media giant deleted a tweet by President Muhammadu Buhari, which seemed to threaten violence against the southeastern secessionist group. Twitter claimed the message had violated its rules against abusive behaviour. The deletion of Buhari's tweet came after Twitter's announcement earlier in the year that it would be setting up its first African office in Accra, not Lagos. In its justification, Twitter cited Ghana's support for free speech, online freedom and the open internet. The choice came despite the fact that Nigeria probably has more Twitter users, around 40 million by some estimations, than Ghana's entire population. Many believe the decision to ban Twitter in Nigeria could backfire and cost the country economically in terms of new investments into its technology sector. In recent years, the country has had good track record at attracting investments in start-up tech businesses. The ban could threaten its reputation in this regard as a forward-thinking, technology-savvy country. As one prominent Nigerian web developer put it, in the long run, this might be a blow to the Nigerian government and not to Twitter. And now to some sports news. Ethiopian athlete Letesnebet Gide smashed the women's 10,000-metre world record during Olympic trials held in Holland on Tuesday. Gide's time of 29 minutes 1.3 seconds narrowly bettered the previous world record set just 2 days earlier by Dutch athlete Sifan Hassan. Gide was confident going into the race, saying, "I expected to run a world record and I'd like to break the world record again, this time going under 29 minutes. Letesnebet is the first woman to hold world records for both the 5,000 and 10,000 metres since Ingrid Christensen in the late 1980s. Her incredible form bodes well for Olympic success later in the year. The Ethiopian Football Federation has announced the selection of 35 squad players for the upcoming Under-23 Cecafa Cup to be hosted by Ethiopia later this year. The East and Central Africa Football Tournament will take place in Bahir from the 3rd to the 18th of July. The Under-23 squad, led by coach Wubutu Abate, will be reduced to a core 23 players in the coming weeks as competition first-team places hots up. The players have been selected from all 13 Ethiopian Premier League clubs and 4 of the top second-tier clubs. 5 players who played in a team which qualified for next year's Africa Cup of Nations are included in the under-23 squad. Soon after the tournament, they will join the senior Ethiopian national team to start their full training sessions together. Federation officials said that the selected members of the national under-23 squad are invited to report to the Ethiopian Football Federation office on June the 10th to claim their spots. And this brings us to the end of this week's news review on Arts TV. Thanks for watching. I've been Pete Nash, and catch you next time.